Hello dear friends, this is Anil Kumar Shrivastava. Today I will be discussing Government of India Act 1935 and its salient features. In fact, since it is a lengthy, so we will be dividing it into 2 or 3 lectures. Today we will be discussing its main features. It is important simply due to the fact that our constitution borrows a lot from this act. In fact, we have inherited a lot from this act, prompting several scholars to say that government in Delhi is drained not by the Yamuna but by the Thames. In other words, we still very much steep in the tradition of British institution, or we have inherited British institutional tradition and incorporated into our written constitution. So we would be discussing at length the salient features of the Government of India Act 1935. Now look at its features. First, look at the central legislature, or the structure of the central legislature, also called the Governor General in Council. In fact, for the first time in 1773, when the Regulating Act was passed by the House of Commons or the British Parliament. In fact, since then, this legislature, which today we call Parliament is a Leviathan structure, but it was a miniature structure. Then it was for the first time called Governor General in Council, and that continued into you can say 1947, when the British Parliament finally passed the Indian Independence Act 1947. So Governor General in Council also came to be called Central Legislature. It consisted of 2 houses. In fact, this bipartisan division, or this division of the legislature, took place for the first time in 1919 under the Government of India Act 1919. So it consisted of 2 houses: Federal Assembly, which today we call the Lok Sabha, and the Council of States, which in the Hindi we call the Rajya Sabha. In fact, then the British attempted to pacify the princely states in a way where the reactionary forces could be kept at bay. So look at this one. Federal Assembly was to consist of 375 members, out of which 250 members were to be elected from the British provinces. I would like to tell you that due to severe restrictions on voting rights or electoral eligibilities, only 14% of the Indians were eligible to cast their franchise or their votes. 250 members now come to here. 250 members were to be elected from the British provinces, and 125 members, almost 40% weightage, were given to the princely states. Princely states were to nominate the representatives. No representative was to be elected from the princely states. Hence, it consisted of 375, the breakup of which has been given. Now come to the upper house. It was to consist of 260 members, out of which 156 were to be elected from the British provinces, and 104 were to be nominated by the princely states. Now look at the salient features. Look at the salient features. Here you can see the headline salient features. First, which diarchy was criticized for being non-traditional and contrary to all parliamentary tradition. What I mean to say, that was to be imposed in 1919 under the Government of India Act 1919, and even the Simon Commission criticized it, that the same diarchy was now to be removed from the provinces and was to be implanted at the center. However, in reality, it never came into existence. Note this point for the prelims point of view, for the civil services preliminary examination point of view. The diarchy at the center as proposed never came into existence. The center was to have diarchy. Diarchy means one part of the subjects or one section of the subjects was to be governed directly by the Governor General without consulting the ministers or the councillors, and another part was to be governed on the basis of the advice tendered by the Council of Ministers. However, the Governor General was to enjoy complete control over even the ministers insofar as their dismissal was concerned. The Governor General, in its discretion or in his discretion, could dismiss the Council of Ministers. So even if the diarchy would have come into existence, it would have been in fact an impracticable one. And that's why, due to the opposition of the Indian leaders, diarchy never came into existence at the center. Second, it was to include both the British provinces and princely states as per the Constitution Act. In fact, the Government of India Act 1935 accompanied Constitution Act and Instrument of Accession. These two legal instruments were also to be a part of the Government of India Act 1935. So as per the Constitution Act, the British provinces as well as the princely states were to be included in the federation, as you saw it earlier. Now come to the third point. Under the instrument of accession, the states were to be brought. By states here we mean the princely states. S appear in the capital simply to denote that by the states we mean not the modern states, we mean the princely states. By provinces we mean the British provinces and nothing else. So states were to be brought under the federation. As we just discussed above, states were also to be part of the federation, All India Federation. Next point, look at the next point. Complete control over provinces but little control over states were to be sought. In fact, only the foreign relations of the states were to be under the supervision of the Governor General, who also acted as Viceroy, as the representative of the British Crown. So except foreign affairs, the Governor General did not have any control over the states, princely states, but he was to have complete control over the provinces in all administrative and legal and other matters. Now look at the next point. Provincial governments were to be responsible governments. It was proposed that provincial governments were to be responsible governments. In other words, the elected Indian Council of Ministers were to be accountable to the lower house. In fact, there were only 6 provinces in which they were bicameral. There were provisions for 2 houses. One, the lower house called the State Assembly, and or Provincial Assembly. In fact, then it was Provincial Assembly, and the upper house was to be called the Legislative Council. So the Bihar, Calcutta, that is Bombay, Bengal, Bombay, Madras, Assam, and United Province, which today is called the UP, the state of Uttar Pradesh. In fact, these 6 provinces only to have bicameral legislature. In other words, they were to have 2 houses, the lower house and the upper house, as I just stated. So in these, except in these states, all other states were to have the single house. In other words, the assembly only. It means that where two houses were in existence. In fact, in those states, the Council of Ministers was to be responsible to the lower house, and where only the lower house was in existence, the Council of Ministers were to be or was to be accountable only to the lower house. So, however, in practice, there were many if and buts, as the provincial governors had to poke their nose into day-to-day affairs of the ministers and virtually crippled their functioning, which we would be in fact discussing under the criticism of these features. Now look at the other part of the salient features. The Governor General was to enjoy exclusive powers called in fact the powers which he enjoyed in his individual judgment with respect to defense, external affairs, ecclesiastical or religious affairs, excluded and partially excluded areas, that is tribal areas, under Schedule 5 and under Schedule 6. Even today in our constitution we have this provision. Now look at the another say feature. Members of both the Federal Assembly and the Council of States were to be partly elected from the provinces, while partly to be nominated by the princely states. We have already discussed about this. Next point, the Governor General was to enjoy overriding and special responsibility power. By overriding, we mean that he could reject or set aside, or he could act without seeking advice from the Council of Ministers, or even if the Council of Ministers tendered their uh, advice. He was not bound to go by them. In fact, he could easily override them. By special responsibility, we mean the responsibility that the Governor General was obliged to observe in practice, and that related to the interest of the British Empire. In other words, if any danger to the security of India and to the interest of the British Empire was there, he was not bound to go by the advice of the Council of Ministers or his councillors. In fact, he was bound to act according to the situation that could bring it under control. So this came to be called a special responsibility power. Now look at the provincial autonomy. It was the most striking feature as you look at this one. Provinces for the first time got the subjects as their own. Even under the Government of India Act 1919, they got the subjects by way of delegation. In other words, subjects theoretically until 1919 belonged to the Governor General or to the center. In fact, there was no federation. Federation for the first time came into existence under the Government of India Act 1935. And since federating units enjoy autonomy, that's why this autonomy was given to the provincial regions or provincial governments, called as the regional governments. And it was the most striking feature. For the first time, they got subjects as their own. Now look at this one. 6 British provinces were to be bicameral, as I have already explained. I would like to tell you here again that for the first time 3 lists were designed. That is the union list, state list, and concurrent list. In fact, union list, concurrent list, and state list, or provincial list. In fact, then it was called provincial list. Today it is called, under Article 246, it is called state list. So then it was called federal list. Today it is called union list. In fact, we have borrowed this feature from the Government of India Act 1935, and it is the basis for the autonomy enjoyed by the states. Now look at other features. Residuary powers generally, as is the case in the United States of America, vest in the provinces, that is the states, that is the federating units. And in India, on the reverse, it vests in the center, that is, it is vested with the parliament. But contrary to these two traditions, in fact, residuary powers under the Government of India Act 1935 were to be vested in the Governor General himself, not in the legislature nor in the provinces. Now look at at another point. The center could exercise wide powers over the provinces. That is, insofar as administrative matters were related or concerned, the Governor General had wide powers that we would be discussing in detail later. Now look at another point. It was mandated that All India Federation would come into force only if half of the princely states. Here again, the English played, attempted to pacify or play to the gallery by giving more weightage to the princely states, unnecessarily making this provision that unless half of the princely states joined the federation, it would not come into existence. In other words, they were reactionary forces. They never wanted independence of the sorts that our nationalist leaders thought, and hence they were favorite to the British rule or to the British government. That's why, in order to keep them on their side or keep them happy or on their board, the British attempted to pacify them by giving this provision, by making this provision that unless half of the princely states joined the federation, the Indian Federation, in fact, this All India Federation, what we mean to say, would never come into existence. Now look at another point. Provisions for federal court, that is the Supreme Court today, in fact, is a legacy of the past. And for the first time, the present Supreme Court as federal court came into existence in 1937 under the provisions of the Government of India Act 1935. So today we have discussed the salient features of the Government of India Act 1935. Next time we would be having a discussion on the same topic. In fact, we would be discussing, further elaborating upon what were the administrative powers of the Governor General, and what criticism have been leveled against the provisions of this act, and what should have been the case, and what we have inherited from this today as we find it in our constitution. Thank you.